we got a tweet from at Bobby Parsons 07 on X/Twitter. Now, this account, not sure exactly who runs it, but they have apparently had some inside sources that have come true. They correctly called Elio Castroneves and Martin Truex Jr. running the Daytona 500 this year. For example, seemed to correctly predict the Cadillac lineup for next year in Formula One. This account is saying, quote, Colton Herta will join Prema Racing next season. The American IndyCar race winner will compete in FIA Formula 2, aiming to earn enough super license points to secure a Formula 1 seat in 2027. His replacement at Andretti is still to be determined, with Will Power emerging as the favorite. Now, to be clear, this is all unconfirmed as of yet. And as I understand it, Will Power, obviously, his contract situation at Penske has been very much in the news. We believe that meeting took place today. That's the news we were hearing yesterday, at least. So that's the major piece of the silly season puzzle that still has to fall into place here. But Kobe, since you're our guest, I'll just go to you first here. Colton Herta is going to be 26 in March. That might as well be 46, I think, by Formula 2 standards. This is a very surprising turn of events. It's a turn of events that I think we would have been more likely to see, would have expected to see maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but we could be seeing it right here, right now, going into 2026. What would be your reaction if we did get confirmation that Colton Herta is going to, in the words of J.R. Hildebrand from a few years ago, go effing do it and try to get a Formula One seat by any means necessary here?
Yeah, Ben, there's a lot to unpack with this situation. And the Bobby Parsons you mentioned, I don't have no idea who that guy is, but if someone is, getting multiple stories right, yeah, take it with a grain of salt. But maybe he is an insider who is more connected than we think. But real interesting post that he made on social media. Looking at it right now, yeah, interesting that they would send him to Prema. I know, we talked a lot about Prema this year in the IndyCar series and how they have always, been one of the gold standards of the junior racing categories in Europe. But since they switched to this new F2 car and engine, Prema's basically, instead of becoming the gold standard, they've kind of just fallen, down the running order quite a bit. And they're no longer seen as like the ultimate favorite in FIA Formula 2. And their current drivers this year in F2 is Gabriel Mini and Sebastian Montoya. And looking at the points right now, Sebastian is 9th, Gabriel is 12th. So not really inspiring when you look at where the current Prema drivers are, but maybe they view Colton Herta as an upgrade here. And yeah, it's just really interesting situation here. And for Colton Herta, looking at the super license situation, got those points pulled up right now. Positions 1, 2, and 3 in FIA Formula 2, you get the 40 points you need to go get your super license to be eligible to compete in Formula 1, while only the IndyCar champion, when this year, Alex Palou, you get those 40 points to get a super license. So if the rumors of Palou to Red Bull were to be true, he would obviously, be right up there. Well, actually, the points he's had in the last few years. So he's already good to go to F1 if he wanted to. But if he wasn't, winning an IndyCar championship could, that could be your ticket to F1. And then, like, after positions 1, 2, and 3 in FIA Formula 2, 4th place in the championship, you get 30 super license points. 5th, 20th, 6th get 10. And then 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, you get 8 points, 6 points, 4 points, and 3 points. And then IndyCar, when you go to the 2nd place finish in the championship, instead of getting 40 for the championship win, you get 30. Then 3rd gets 20. And then 4th is 10. And then 5th through 10th, you get 8, 6, 4, 3, 2, and then a single point for the 10th place finisher. So by looking at this, the FIA view in that Formula One, they view IndyCar as a lesser championship compared to Formula 2. And I think it would be a shame, if a driver like Colton Herta has to end up going to Formula 2, because I think you can perform well enough to go to the IndyCar series without needing to take that next step. But one of the reasons why I believe that if it does happen that he could go to Formula 2 is to, get used to the F1 racing environment rather than come from IndyCar and go and get run your FP1 sessions, get the super license. You could probably just do that and he'll be fine. But I'm sure they want him to get used to the environment, since it's a night and day difference being in a Formula 1 paddock compared to an IndyCar paddock. And Nathan Brown from the Indy Star, he wrote a really good article on the situation about Colton Herta, talking about, the dangers of this. And the title of this is "Archaic System May Lead Colton Herta to Take Huge Risks in Racing Career for Lower Category Series." And in this article, Nathan interviewed Ed Carpenter racing driver Alexander Rossi, who we all know as an ex-Formula One driver. end up getting a few races there before his F1 life come to an end. And Alexander Rossi basically said that one of the reasons why you may want Colton Herta to do F2 before going to F1 is because of the Pirelli tire, because the Pirelli tire is much different than the Firestone's IndyCar tire that Colton Herta has, used throughout his IndyCar career. And Alexander Rossi's quoted by saying it's not an IndyCar driving style. Let's put it that way. And then he also talked about it being European race and a lot of politics are going to go into play. And he said that they over there in F1 circles, they make sure the people they want to succeed, and the ones they don't want to succeed don't get to succeed. And being an American driver in a European environment like that, I'm sure Logan Sargent can tell some stories about what he went through, and Alexander Rossi is as well, given his experience. I think it's safe to say Colton Herta goes to Formula 2. He's going to have a massive target on his back, not just from the F2 paddock, but everybody on the entire road to F1. He's going to be under so much pressure. It's probably going to be, a significant amount of pressure that we haven't seen on a driver in a long time. I know there was a lot of pressure and eyes on Kimi Antonelli last year in Formula 2, but I think it might almost rival that since Colton Herta is an American and people have been hyping him up for so long now that they say that this kid could be the next American F1 driver, that he has what it takes to get the job done. And the big risk you take going here, what if he goes over there and, completely flops? Let's say he's, finished outside the top 10 in the championship, then we're never going to hear the end of it, from all those people who don't want to see an American driver at the pinnacle of motorsport. And it's been like, see, that's why, you guys can't come over here and do this. But I think it's obviously a huge risk for Colton Herta if he decides to go to Formula 2 to try to eventually get into F1, because if he goes to Formula 2, and gets the super license points that he needs and the experience and performs extremely well, then I guess it was worth the risk. But I fear like what happened if he doesn't, if he goes out there and he finishes outside of the points and struggles and has a whole lot of incidents. And then Joshua Burt's talking about the unpredictable engine that they have in F2 now, because they have a lot of issues with that. They need a brand new engine, honestly, because I don't know what's wrong with this engine. It's just sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and it's really hurt quite a few drivers since we switched to the new engine and chassis in Formula 2. So, and plus you mentioned the politics that Rossi talked about in that article. It makes me really worried about Colton Herta and what could potentially happen. And in Nathan's article, he spoke to someone who has ties to, that part of the world in F1. When asked about a potential move to Colton Herta, this person said, I think that's crazy. I think it's a huge risk. And then Alexander Rossi was asked by Nathan, what do you think this could potentially be damaging to a driver's career if you go to Formula 2 and not perform? And Rossi is quoted saying, yeah, it's seen as a lower category. Let's not forget about the FIA and how they assign points. It's seen as a lower category. So yes, theoretically, it would be a risk. And the reason why Colton Herta was highly touted as a potential F1 prospect, because he got on the road to Indy, did extremely well. And then in his third career IndyCar start, I believe he was just 18 years old at the time. He won that Circuit of the Americas. I remember that victory. It was a very impressive for an 18-year-old kid, very young in IndyCar, and his third career start to come out there and win, because you don't really see many 18, 19-year-old kids in IndyCar coming out and winning so quickly. And, then the hype about Colton Herta, it started to rise that he could be this guy. And he really looked the part quite a bit. And I remember in his rookie season, ended up winning twice. He won the season finale at Laguna Seca as well. Ended up finishing top 10 in the points in the very next year. He finished third in the championship. So a lot of great things. And then after that, slid down to fifth, and then 2022, 2023, not so good years, finishing 10th in the championship. 2024 was a huge bounce back year, finished runner up. And then, then we're like, yeah, maybe, it was just 2 down years for Colton, and maybe he can get up there, and continue to show what he's worth. And then, this year, 2025, winless year, Colton wasn't really to show, much of anything. And I said this on the Great Tonight Show when these rumors first came out. I said, in the past, I thought Colton Herta's his prospects for Formula One were much higher. And honestly, I think, given his performances in IndyCar in recent years, I think it's kind of cooled off quite a bit. And I'm not sure, if he has that it factor about going to F1, and end up succeeding. I think at this point in his career, it would probably be in his best interest, to just stay in IndyCar, and continue to build and try to compete for wins and championships. But if you go to Formula 2, it's certainly a massive risk that you would end up taking. So I'm not really sure what Colton Herta is going to do next. I just hope he ends up making the right decision, because the consequences could be really heavy. And I know motorsport.com put out a graphic today from an account on X titled Champ Web, said, talking about, they say you win Indy 500, you go down in history forever. You win the feature, the F2 feature race, on the streets of Azerbaijan and Baku. They say you'll become nothing more than a column in a spreadsheet. Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's certainly one way to put it. But just to summarize everything I said, I know I brought a lot of information with me tonight, but I think it would be great if Colton Herta succeeds in this, but if he doesn't, oh man, this is not going to end well at all for him.
And thank you for all that, Kobe. And as much risk as there is for him to take this endeavor, I keep looking at the states. I keep looking at the IndyCar side of this equation, and the state that Will Power is in right now, and his future being uncertain, and where he's going to end up, or whether he's going to call it a career. That Andretti Global spot would be a good comparable place, I think, for someone of Will Power's stature to be going to if he has to leave Team Penske. But yeah, also Colton Herta, his career in IndyCar has not really been the same as what it once was in 2020 and 21, 22 or so. It has kind of tapered off. So, if he takes this leap, if these rumors are true, you said it, he's going to have to go over there and perform. It's going to have to be the most perfect debut season in Formula 2 to make this work. I mean, just a while ago, whenever we thought that Michael and Mario Andretti were behind the whole Cadillac deal, we kept saying on this show that he was one of our top prospects to go over there and be a part of that Cadillac seat. I mean, we thought about this before of him going over to Europe, but with the, at least this season anyway, with Alex Palou and his domination in the NTT IndyCar series, and how it seems like he's not going over to the other side of the world anytime soon, and he's going to stay right where he is and going to keep dominating. Now, how much that's true has yet to be seen, but I really feel like it. I'm right there with you. It's a huge risk, but I think Colton Herta could flip a switch if he wanted to, and but there is a lot of things to get acclimated to there. You talked about the tire difference, the culture difference, the politics behind, the hearsay of, they decide who gets to succeed and who doesn't. But out of all this, though, I keep hearing in the back of my mind, right, if you leave this, your chances of winning the Indianapolis 500 are impossible if you're not here. So, I mean, what's more important in his career? Is it to take the F1 route, or is it to be an Indianapolis 500 champion? I think it would be the latter on that one. But yeah, winning the F2 feature at Monaco is okay.
Yeah, it's definitely impossible next year. We all know that with the clash between the Canadian Grand Prix. There's not going to be a Fernando situation. Well, I guess maybe there could be if they just. But yeah, I mean, races are going to literally be happening at the exact same time, not even on the exact same day, which is still unfortunate. I keep hoping and praying that cooler heads might prevail and they can maybe change that last minute. But I'm just thinking back to the conversations that I've had this afternoon. I was pretty fired up when I saw the Bobby Parsons tweet. Again, take that with a grain of salt, but they have been right in the past before. Our friend Jonathan Field asked this question to all of us in our chat. If you got the opportunity to run F1, would you take it if you have a chance? If Colton Herta had gotten the super license exemption and gotten the AlphaTauri seat in 2023, I think in hindsight, thank goodness he didn't with the current state of Red Bull's program. But if he had gotten that, absolutely no judgment there. Go, as JR said, go freaking do it. Like that's a once in a lifetime. We thought once in a lifetime, at least, opportunity. Who knows where that could lead if you perform well in that seat. F1's the pinnacle of motorsport. If he wants to do it, let him do it. At that point in his career, I would have been all for that. I don't see this as Colton Herta having a chance to go to Formula 1. I see this as Colton Herta having a chance to go to Formula 2 to potentially land a Formula One seat. And by the way, we talked on this show before, even if he goes out and wins the F2 championship, maybe he's got a direct line with Cadillac, and Mario's still on the board over there. And obviously Michael Andretti's involvement with Andretti Autosport. I mean, maybe there's a more direct line there than there would be for a regular F2 champion. I don't know, but we've seen F2 champions in the past have to sit out a year or two, or maybe go race something else entirely because there just isn't an open seat for them. And you know what? The ironic thing here is that, you know, both of you guys said, you know, Colton's going to have to go set the world on fire. He has 30 points from that runner-up finish in 2024. So he could theoretically, I think he ended up 7th this weekend in the final standings, which gets him another, for whatever it's worth, gets him another 4 points. So going into next year, he could actually, if I'm reading this chart correctly, he could finish as low as 8th in the F2 championship, get those 6 points. That would get him to the magic number of 40. He'd be set for 2027. He could honestly probably finish lower than that because you get 1 point for doing an FP1 session as long as you run 100 kilometers. I keep saying if an F1 team wants him that badly, you know, he's on 35 points right now. He could do 5. There's still more than 5 races left to go in this season. He could do 5 FP1s and be ready for 2026 if he wanted to. So he is right on the cusp. He is very close. He wouldn't need to win the championship or even need to finish top 3 to get the seat, to be eligible for the seat. But I think he would need to go out and, at the bare minimum, finish top 3 or ideally win the F2 championship outright to prove to the doubters that he's serious about this and that he has the potential to maybe go on and actually perform well in Formula One. But again, the thing that I keep coming back to is even if he does that, what would you rather have? Would you rather have a situation in IndyCar where maybe, okay, you know, Andretti Global right now is not, you know, a top 2 team in IndyCar right now. They're not going to contend with Ganassi or maybe McLaren or Penske. Obviously, Penske had a very down year. They bounced back at the finale, certainly with Newgarden and McLaughlin. But you're not going to beat Alex Palou right now. Kyle Kirkwood's the number 1 driver on your own team at this point. But maybe you could win a race or 2 per year. You're certainly going to have a chance to compete at the Indianapolis 500. Would you rather be in that position, or would you rather go to F2, have to sacrifice a year of your career in a feeder series, then maybe get a Formula One seat, and then you're fighting for 13th in a Cadillac or a Haas or an RB or a team like that? I just don't see a seat at McLaren opening up anytime soon. I don't see a seat, you know, who knows how many years Lewis Hamilton has left. I don't think Colton Herta would be the next in line whenever Lewis decides to call it quits. I don't know if he'd be the next in line at Aston Martin once Fernando Alonso calls it quits. I don't see an open seat at Mercedes right now. They've got 2 young, solid drivers in George Russell and Kimi Antonelli, the prodigy, but they're trying to, you know, that they put in their seat at this point in his career, this early at 18 years old. They think very highly of him. I'm sure they want him around for a long time. And I certainly don't want him getting involved in the Red Bull situation right now with where that team is at and, you know, the carousel of second drivers that have been teammates to Max Verstappen. Maybe Max Verstappen's going to be at Mercedes in a couple of years, and then there certainly isn't an open seat there with Kimi Antonelli and everything. So I just, from looking to draw it all back here and, you know, put a bow on this, it seems to me this is a very high risk, low reward situation that Colton Herta could find himself in. The chances of him winning an F2 championship and then getting a midfield seat in 2027, and then somebody like McLaren saying, hey, Lando, we're sorry, but how can we not sign this Colton Herta kid who's setting the world on fire, and him ending up being Oscar Piastri's teammate and competing for a world championship? I mean, the odds of that are so astronomically slim that I don't see the big, I mean, maybe you could look back and say, well, I was the best American F1 driver of the last 30, 40 years. I had a 3 or 4 year career, scored some points, maybe got a podium once or twice. I mean, that to me is the realistic ceiling that Colton Herta would find himself in if he takes this F1 path and everything goes right. That's assuming everything goes right. It could not. He could stall out and maybe not even finish top 5 in the championship in F2. And then I think it's just, you know, you look back and you'd be given the trolls who constantly, you know, the F1 elitists, if you will, you'd be giving them all sorts of material to work with there. And on the flip side, I know people say like, oh, he's you know, Brian Herta's his father. He's got connections. He can always go back. You know, he certainly can. Michael Andretti never won the Indy 500. You know, he went off to Formula One. He was there and sent his teammate over at McLaren. It didn't go very well. He lost a year of his career doing that. He lost a few years of Indy 500 chances because of the split. does he look back on his career now and maybe say, was it really worth it, losing out on the chance to run Indy for a couple of years to go chase, an F1 seat? I don't know. So again, it all comes down to me for what Colton wants. If Colton wants to do this, I will be rooting for him. I'll be pulling for him to succeed and prove all his doubters wrong. And I would love nothing more than for him to go set the world on fire over there and end up in a top Formula One seat and us have some American representation on the grid. But I say this as somebody that has been, nobody on this network, I don't think, has been arguing more so for an American F1 driver over the last several years. I don't know that anybody on this network took the stance that I took when we got the news that Canada is going to clash with the Indy 500 next year. They know how disillusioned I am with IndyCar right now. I said in the chat on grid tonight, I might watch the Canadian Grand Prix over the Indy 500 next year. That's how fed up I am with what's going on in the IndyCar series. And I am sitting here telling you, I am praying that Colton Herta is back in IndyCar next year and not in a Prema Formula 2 seat. That's just where I'm at. If this were 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, at that point in his career, I would say absolutely take that chance. But I just feel like that ship has sailed at this point in his career, and the risk far outweighs the potential reward if he goes and chases an F1 seat at 26 years old.
Yeah, certainly, Ben. I agree with everything you said, and like I was saying earlier, I think that Colton Herta, if this happens, like the pressure on him is going to be significant, and it'll be interesting to see how he would navigate, the politics of racing, on the European scene, learning tracks that he's never been to before. And one thing I forgot to mention, before he got on the road to Indy, Colton Herta actually moved to Europe and raced in Europe, so he knows some of the F2 tracks on the schedule. So it's not like he's going in completely blind and all of that. And plus, you have the simulators where you can do that, but nothing beats doing the real thing. There's only be like a small handful of tracks that he's never been to, so at least he does have some experience on those tracks. But at the end of the day, it's certainly going to be a difficult task to try to go out there and perform right away. Just seeing where Prema is right now in Formula 2, that makes me kind of worry. If it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I'm like, yes, this is the best possible seat you can be in with Prema. But Prema, like I say, since they switched over to this new engine and chassis, they haven't had the same magic. They just haven't been able to make it work, regardless, of what driver you put in that Prema car. It just hasn't been able to work. Now, Gabriel Meni, Sebastian Montoya, highly touted drivers, they haven't been able to do much in the Prema car this year. And I wonder how Colton would do in that car. And, on the flip side, we talk about Colton, potentially leaving IndyCar going to F2. How about the drivers who went from F2 into IndyCar? Look at Christian Lundgaard. He's had success. Got Marcus Armstrong, great season. A lot of top 10s this year. You obviously have Callum Milot as well. Then you have Robert Schwartzman, who had never been on an oval track before and won the pole for the biggest race in the world. So we have seen success, go the other way, from F2 to IndyCar. When you talk to those drivers with F2 experience, they say that it's not that hard to adapt their driving style from the F2 car to the IndyCar. So maybe if you flip it the other way around, minus the Pirelli tire, maybe it won't be as big of a transition for Colton Herta as we think. Maybe it'll go like it's gone with F2 to IndyCar. Maybe you go to IndyCar to F2, and maybe it won't be as bad once he learns, the driving style with the Pirelli tires.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, again, I have, like I said, I'll be rooting for Colton if he does this to prove all his doubters wrong. I'm not going to put it past him to go out and perform there. I'm just saying, if he doesn't, again, you give the trolls and the elitists, a lot of material to work with, unfortunately. So, again, Brad, I don't know if you have any final thoughts on this before we close out this segment here, but that's the phrase I keep coming back to: high risk, low reward at this point in Colton Herta's career.
Yeah, it's one of those things I just kind of hope is a rumor, because I feel like an Indy 500 championship again, or to be called an Indy 500 champion, would far outweigh the, like you said, Ben, the possibility. It's not even a guarantee of a Formula One seat, and I mean, even if you make it there, what then? What then of your career? What will it be said of what you're able to contribute? So, I mean, I think he's best to wait it out where he is, and hopefully this is just not going to come to fruition. But if it does, I hope he comes out of the gate running and with plenty of experience to back himself up.
Yeah, well, and again, just one final point on this. I mentioned his age at the start of this. Brandon, we've been talking a little bit on this show this year about Richard Verschoor, who's now in year 5 of Formula 2. Colton Herta's, I think, 8 or 9 months older than Richard Verschoor. So Richard Verschoor, there have been conversations about, what is he still doing here? He's too old for the series. He's had his chances. He's taking a seat from another young driver that, maybe has more realistic path to Formula One. I mean, again, it almost feels like, it's so out of place for Colton to be taking what I think is a step down at this point in his career. I think,
Absolutely.
if you had to map out a road to Formula One ladder and you went, fully in terms of American championships, I suppose IndyCar would be the last stepping stone before Formula One. But nobody ever thinks of IndyCar like that, right? I think very rarely would a driver say, okay, I'm here in America. I'm going to stay in America, work my way up the road to Indy, go through Indy next, win an IndyCar championship, and then I'm going to start talking to Formula One. Any American that's tried to get to F1 the last several years, they've moved over to Europe. They've raced in the European championships and tried to go up the ladder that way. You're seeing it right now with Jack Crawford, who's had a couple of years in Formula 2, and I think is significantly closer to an F1 seat than Colton Herta would be, even if he makes this jump next year.
Ask Alexander Rossi, ask Marcus Ericsson why they left, and they'll tell you quite plainly.